committee report would mention how the former secretary may have unwittingly approved the new parameters which increase the price and decrease the quantity of laptops to be purchased.
Ayon kay DepEd spokesperson Michael Poa, inilapit na nila ang issue sa Commission on Audit. Nagkaroon na rin daw ng tinatawag na fraud audit at hinihintay na lang nila ang resulta.
Ang tinutukan ng ating Vice President Secretary of Education na ilabas yung procurement, gawing talagang isang strand siya para meron talagang USEC and ASEC that are both just focused on the procurement. Of course, aside from the BACs, or Bids and Awards Committees, na talagang tututok.
Almost 1 billion pesos spent on laptops for public school teachers in 2021. The problem, these laptops were outdated and overpriced. Now the Senate Blue Ribbon Committee wants those involved in the purchase charged. It is also recommending the abolition of the Budget Department's procurement service. What happens next? We will discuss in this episode of the Chiefs. Welcome to the Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. Kasama po natin online, Chiefs in Manila. Ami Pamintuan, Editor-in-Chief of the Philippine Star. And Regina Lay is also online. She's the One News Business Editor. Chiefs, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Ami, anong headlines natin bukas?
Muna, good news muna. Si Dalit De Leon, hindi nakakuha ng award. Pero nominated din naman siya Best Supporting Actress sa Britain naman niya yun.
BAFTA.
For the same movie. Yes, BAFTA.
Okay.
Baka may pag-asa.
Bukod sa pag-asa, I think these are already honors that she's reaping not just for herself but for the country. O sige, now let's move on. In the meantime, President Marcos still in Davos. Anong updates natin doon?
Yun na nga, hindi ba in-interview siya? Sabi niya yung daw South China Sea issue, it keeps him up late at night.
Yeah, that's very surprising, no? I think that's the most straightforward answer we've heard from him as far as the South China Sea issue is concerned. He called it very, very worrisome. So talagang it's a real issue in his mind.
Oh, but at the same time...
Nakita naman natin, di ba, yung picture ng Agence France Press nung isang araw Kitang-kita naman yung napakalaking Chinese Coast Guard ship. At nandun yung ating maliit na bangka in Scarborough Shoal. So yan ang problema ng mga fishermen natin.
Which probably also somehow explains that despite everything that you just said and despite, medyo intriguing yung linya na yun, keeps him up at night, he worries about this. But then again, when pressed, ano yung foreign policy, sabi niya, all very measured, all very conservative, we will not get involved. And he frames it even as not even about us, that ultimately it's about China and US rivalry.
Well, we have economic ties to think of, no? Kahit naman yung ibang bansa nagaganyan engaging with China, especially on economic matters. Pero pagdating dyan, hindi natin alam kung saan papunta yan sa security.
Ito yung mga babantayan natin sa mga susunod na araw pa. Certainly, we will be talking about this. But in the meantime, we take a look back at an issue na hindi natin iiwan to. The Senate, ayaw tantanan to. We will speak to our first guest after a short break. Stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back.
National Economic Development Authority, or NEDA, expresses support for the proposal to impose taxes on luxury items.
Yan ang panukalang sinusulong ni Congressman Joey Salceda. Anya, ituturing na luxury ang isang produkto kung hindi ito kayang bilhin ng mas nakakarami.
The measure proposed by Albay Representative Joey Salceda could help the government boost its revenues.
Theoretically, ito kasi ay parang lumalabas na parang halos a tax on the wealthy. So, maganda na rin po ito na may ano natin siya para una makatulong sa pagkuha ng revenue. Siyempre, dapat tatapatan din ito ng good governance. Malaman nila na napupunta naman sa maayos na mga proyekto na talagang pang development and also for poverty reduction, siyempre.
Tax the rich, help the poor. That's the bottom line of the proposal to expand taxes on luxury items. It seemed to generate at least 12 billion pesos more for the Treasury. Let's bring into the discussion Undersecretary Rosemary De Leon of the National Economic Development Authority, or NEDA. Welcome to the Chiefs, Yusek De Leon.
Yes, hello, good evening.
Good evening, Yusek.
Good evening.
Yusek, pasok ka agad tayo dito kasi kanina si Congressman Salceda was sort of touched into it. But basic question, how do we define a luxury item? Kasama ba sibuyas dyan? Kasama ba Charles and Keith bags? Kasama ba dyan? No, but seriously, how do we define, where do we draw the line? Kasi ang luxury items ni Ami tsaka ni Regina, iba yan sa luxury items ko eh.
Luxury.
Totoo yan, and that's also the reason why we actually need to wait until the draft bill is with us so we can study it properly. Offhand, theoretically, maganda naman na yung concept of a luxury tax is what we call a progressive tax, no? But like I said, kailangan natin ng detalye nito. So as soon as we get the draft bill from the good congressman, then ipag-aaralan namin ng maayos to. And of course, recommend as well kung anong pwede nating, anong pwedeng improvements on the bill. Kasama na yung definition ng luxury.
But let's say, let's take kung sino man ang peg natin. In countries where they have luxury taxes, what's the methodology for that?
It's really, for instance, we have, nung dati, meron tayong tinatawag na yung different treatment ng taxes on the, not the taxes, pero yung classification of a certain store, if it's selling luxury goods or not, so magkaiba yung mga equity restrictions, no? But this has already been amended by the Foreign Investment Act. So in that case, what we do is tinitingnan namin yung presyohan for the same item, okay? Then how much more expensive it is. So kunwari yung bag, no? Kung the same capacity ng bag, ganyan, gaano ang range, tapos dapat nandun siya sa pinakamataas na tier, so to speak. No? Essentially, ganun yung it's still looking at the ano ba yung average, and then how far it is from the average.
So Yusek talagang mga siya, yung mga for the super rich lang. Kasi yun ang sinabi ni Congressman Salceda, halimbawa, sa kotse daw, yung mga above 5 million, yung mga real estate, yung may mga cut-off na siya actually ng mga price eh. So hindi tatamaan dyan yung middle class kahit yung upper middle class, hindi siya tatamaan.
Supposedly, pero madali naman naming ma-check yan, no? With the most recent family income expenditure survey. Makita lang namin yung detalye ng
Kasi yun ang inaalala ng ibang negosyante. It might harm daw our image while our attractiveness as a shopping destination. Alam niyo naman dito sa Asia, nagpupuntahan ng mga turista dito para mamili kasi nga mura daw. What's your reaction to that concern?
At totoo din yun, no? Kasi ayaw din naman natin, kumbaga balansihan lang din to, no? We also don't want to discourage yung, yung consumption dahil alam naman natin na malaking tulong to sa ating ekonomiya. But at the same time, we want it to be yun nga yung a progressive na income tax. Progressive tax. So there's a consumption tax. So supposedly hindi rin dapat tatamaan ang upper middle income. So like I said, it really has to do with the average. Baka nga hindi rin I don't know kung tama nga rin na maglalagay tayo ng yung absolute amount ba? Kasi syempre nagbabago yung absolute amount and sa inflation. Pero tingnan muna natin yung detalye ng proposal.
But as I understand it, USEC, there is already currently tax on things like yachts and jewelry, no? Tsaka meron din sa capital gains. How is this going to be any different?
I think there will be more items now that will be included. Yan. Kasi dati siguro ito yung mga nakikita na consumption really of the ultra rich. Siguro ngayon mas marami na yung naging consumption items that are being usually consumed by the ultra rich. So isa rin ito sa mga titignan.
So potentially we're talking, for example, art or for example, high-end liquor, ganon. Potentially. Kasi consumption we're talking consumption here, right?
Yes. But of course, if it's liquor, meron na rin naman silang sa sin tax. No? Pero I think what Congressman Salceda is saying is it is over and above all those other taxes. So titingnan muna natin kung yung talagang proposal niya, and then we will compare notes if it will really redound in net benefit to the entire society, also looking at how consumption will be affected naman by this one.
Ma'am, the concept of a progressive tax is, I think, it's clear.
Yes.
And pareho naman yung objectives. Pero magkaiba to, no? Iba yung luxury tax proposal, which the NEDA is supporting. Iba yung wealth tax proposal naman ng Makabayan Bloc sa Kongreso. Maybe touch on that a bit. What is the difference here? Both are targeting the super rich. Both will purport that it is progressive. But why the luxury tax, and what's your assessment of the proposal for a wealth tax in comparison?
Kasi we also need to balance it against the ease of enforcement or the ease of administration of the tax. No? If it's a wealth tax, then it's still difficult to have all those parang to have a determination of the wealth. Marami pa tayong mga batas na kailangang ayusin doon. Bank secrecy laws, for instance. Even now, unless it's parang on suspicion of money laundering, other than that, hindi pa rin, hindi pa rin pwede. So there are still many problems in administering a wealth tax. And there's also the problem of you might not want to, especially if it's capital that you're taxing, let's say mga stocks. No? What we are taxing is actually yung mga transactions. Yan. But not really yung wealth mo na yan. Kasi that's easily transferable. Paano kapag halimbawa doon na lang sila sa ibang bansa mag-ano? So these are things that needs to be balanced. No? In the case of luxury goods, yung mga consumption tax, kumbaga nakikita mo, no? Very visible naman to. So madali mong malalaman kung nagkaroon nga siya ng luxury goods, bumili ng luxury goods, and yun. But like I said, there's still a lot of details that need to be ironed out here. We need to know muna paano yung enforcement, paano natin ma-determine nga.
Yusek, mag-zoom out muna ako. Nabanggit na kanina ni Robbie yung onion . Pero talagang yan ang pinoproblema ngayon ng mga tao, high inflation, ano? And part of the problem is yun na nga, mahina yung agriculture sector natin, agricultural production. You're part of NEDA, and meron na ba kayong mga studies for a long-term solution? Matagal na natin problema to, we know. It was inherited by this administration. Meron na ba mga studies ang NEDA?
Marami, no? This is actually, this has long been studied. We have also requested technical assistance already from ADB, from World Bank, and then of course kami rin mismo. Meron na kami mga ginawa na studies dito. Kasi especially when people think about the old days nga daw, na dati no, tayo pag-export pa ganun. And I keep, whenever people tell me that, I keep telling them, those were the days when we were only 42 million people. No? Ngayon, 113 million people na tayo. No? Masyado na tayong marami. Hindi naman talaga lumalaki yung lupa. And so we really need to modernize the agriculture sector. We really need to have more of the R&D. And alongside this, ito rin yung isang sa R&D. No? Sometimes it takes a long time for it to really, for us to see the results. So dapat talaga meron tayong there is that support that's needed, not just financial, but also the political support. No? So even when we did Ambition noon, we were saying that by 2040 mas dadami pa tayong mga Pilipino, and by that time we should be talking about biotechnology, agricultural biotechnology. The traditional way of farming, especially with climate change, this one we really need to study how we should adjust our production processes, pati na rin yung mga post-production processes natin, pati na rin yung storage practices natin, to keep up with all these changes, especially ngayon, mas mataas na yung demand, mas kakaunti yung ating production factors, especially land. And then you also have the climate change that's happening. So all this need to be really taken into consideration. So at the moment, we have neighboring countries actually that have already figured something out. And sila din, actually may advantage din sila, no? They have kept their population in check. Wala sila masyadong bagyo. For instance, talking about Thailand, it's one big country, mas malaki pa sila sa atin. In our case, we're parang 30 million hectares, 10 million, 8 million na pala, 8 million hectares of agricultural land divided into 7,000 plus islands. So, ganun kaliliit. Unlike in Thailand, mas unti sila sa atin, and their country is bigger, and hindi rin sila, not an archipelago like us. So, at the same time, they also supported their R&D way back, and they are now reaping the fruits.
Well, in terms of urgency, anong dapat bigyan ng priority? Short term, anong pwede? Yung doable?
In the short term, yun ang binabalansin namin, no? Kasi meron ka nung needs of the farmers, of course, no? Yung mga yung kailangan na, kasi pangkabuhayan to ng ating mga magsasaka. And so we are thinking actually along the lines of like the rice tariffication law, where we impose a tariff, okay? We impose the tariff, and then yung tariff collection ibabalik sa kanila. Some of them is really to support R&D, some of them is to support mechanization. Para noon, we hope that dadating ang time na mababawasan na rin itong importation natin ng rice as a matter of because they have already nag-improve na yung production processes. So ito yung nakikita namin na pwedeng balanse na solution. Let's allow this importation in the meantime para hindi naman mag-suffer yung consumers. But the tariffs that we get from this importation, yun ang ipagpagtugon natin na suporta sa agriculture.
Under the Philippine Development Plan, USEC, there's a target, quite ambitious, I think, to bring inflation down to 2.5 to 4.5%, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Is that achievable? Is that realistic? This is just average inflation for this year, considering that last year we breached the target pretty much every month of the year.
Yes, last year it was really a combination of the factors, especially the Russia-Ukraine, which was not, of course, hindi na anticipate na yung Russia-Ukraine, and that really fueled this, the fuel prices went up. And syempre, nagkawing-kawing na kasi fuel ang naapektuhan. But right now, we're looking at the futures prices of all this, yung sa fuel nga. And of course, knock on wood, wala naman na sanang magiging another shock na lalabas doon. But we think that, given that nagbawas na rin ng lockdowns ang China, meaning yung mga supply chain bottlenecks that we experienced before, hopefully hindi na mag-resurface this year, then we think that it is achievable actually.
Ma'am, just
Secretary R.C. Balisacan, is currently in Davos with the president.
Yes.
And I note
Yes.
with interest that he seems to be, in the inner circle. He's always in meetings with the president and he's always joining the overseas trips. And I'm just wondering whether, what kind of an impact that's had on how NEDA operates. Has that been a big help? Has that made policy making that much easier now that you have the president's ear?
Dati na rin naman, no? If not the president's ear, certainly the economic team has the ear of the president. Pero ngayon nga is, like you said, parang medyo mas direct. They're both Ilocanos, as you know. So there's that factor as well. And we are also thankful na that the president gave his all-out support for the formulation of the Philippine Development Plan. So nang dahil doon na mabilis nating natapos ang PDP. And in fact, he himself will grace our public presentation of the PDP this January 30, if I'm not mistaken. So ganun yung suporta niya. And it's actually, I think nandun kasi yung open communication. So if there's something that we want na makarating sa presidente, either Sec RC would write a memo for the president, we would draft it, of course siya yung mag-clear nun, or a call to the president for a special meeting. But of course, when that meeting comes, we make sure naman that the secretary has all the facts with him, yung mga studies na nagawa, nandiyan na rin siya.
Ma'am, balikan ko lang po yung isang tanong ni Reg. Still on the rather more optimistic outlook of government. President Marcos said, maybe 7% growth this year. Some bankers are saying that's a bit higher than where we would put it. And then to Reg's point, a more optimistic outlook on inflation. You also said, however, knock on wood. Quick question lang, still specifically on the external factor of the Ukraine-Russia war, is that factored in as something that will continue for the rest of the year? Is that still a major assumption that we have na tuloy-tuloy yan, factored in na yan, or kasama ba yan sa knock-on-wood scenarios nyo?
No, it's already been factored in, but of course we're hopeful that things will turn out better. Pero kasama na siya na the possibility of a protracted conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Nakasama na siya sana namin sa aming computation. But I think kasi ang issue dito is how well we are able to adjust to this new scenario of high oil prices. And I think nakapag-adjust na rin naman, marami ang taking active mobility transport na sinasabi. So I think the thrust really is to make this safer siguro. And to have really that option. Tapos maraming pwede. Actually, maganda rin nga na it came at a point that we have better technology, and so many meetings actually kaysa magpuntahan tayo sa isang lugar, mag-Zoom na lang tayo, yung ganun tipo. So this one is also helping, no? So nag-a-adjust ang demand, and therefore that's also keeping the prices in check, in a manner of speaking. Yeah. But I think going forward, what we really need to do is lessen our dependence on imported fuel.
Ma'am.
And what we have done actually is yung sa renewable energy, nagkaroon na ng amendments to the IRR, and that will now allow 100% of foreign ownership para makapasok kasi again, mas advanced yung technology sa labas, ano? So, makakapasok na sila ngayon, and hopefully that will bring down prices.
Ma'am, actually wala na tayong oras, pero I couldn't help. Gusto ko lang sundutin yun. You mentioned active mobility, transport. Active mobility, of course, is where people themselves move, di ba? Walking and pedestrians, biking, and so on. I'm sure that pricked the ears as well of some people watching in. Are we saying we can expect not only more investments in these mobility solutions, biking in particular, pedestrian in particular, but also this is now higher in the consciousness of government as a priority?
Oh yes, definitely. Actually, even during the previous administration, we did a study in Cebu. Davao. Parang how do you transform this into a walkable city? What are the things that you need? So this ones we plan to replicate in the other cities as well. Kung paano gagawin yan. And by the way, another thing that is going to happen this year, actually take effect na, is the zero tariff on electric vehicles. So again, the purpose is really to lessen our dependence on fossil fuel. Like I said, demand management ang kailangan din na isang solution. So if we lessen that demand, then we can keep these prices in check.
Okay. Undersecretary Rosemary De Leon ng NEDA. Ma'am, maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Yusek.
Thank you so much, Yusek.
Yes, walang anuman, and thank you so very much.
And let's start up another conversation after another break. Keep it here on One News. Welcome back to Chiefs. One of the day's top stories, the Senate is recommending the filing of charges against individuals involved in 2021's purchase of overpriced and outdated laptops. Among them, past and present officials of the Department of Education. We now speak with DepEd spokesperson Michael Poa, who's joining us via Zoom. Great to have you again, Attorney Poa.
Hi, good evening, Sir Rocky. Good evening, Ma'am Ami, and good evening, Ma'am.
Sir, I don't think people need a lot of reminding on what this is about. I mean, nung pumutok to, I know a lot of people na nag-Google, nagpunta sa Amazon, nagpunta sa Apple, nagpunta sa Lazada, sa Shopee, basically just to demonstrate na I myself can prove overpriced yan. Di ba? And I myself can show you ang sama ng specs niyan. Di ba? So very quickly, what is the Department of Education's reaction and response now to the Senate saying that, yes, this warrants criminal charges to be filed?
Yes, thank you, Sir Robbie. So first and foremost, of course, itong Senate investigation, we've been following it, and we can say na expected naman talaga na maglabas na sila ng resulta. So pagdating naman po dun sa recommendations and findings ng Senate, I think the DepEd will really consider and really go through the report once we have it. Kasi sa ngayon po hindi pa siya natatransmit, because the recommendations can help us in terms of improving further the controls for the procurement process of DepEd. This is not something that we are doing just now. Even prior to the release of the BRC report, the Vice President Secretary of Education already changed things in DepEd by first and foremost by taking out the procurement division or procurement service, which used to be in the admin strand, kung tawagin namin. Inalabas na siya, and then we established a procurement strand. So a strand focused solely on procurement, where it will be headed by a USEC and an ASEC that will focus again solely on the procurement process. Now, pagdating naman po dun sa nabanggit dun sa filing of charges, we'd really like to see the report to see kung sino yung inaatasan, because of course admin cases could be under DepEd, or it could also be under the Ombudsman. Pero pagdating naman po sa criminal charges, dun po tayo sa Ombudsman. On the part of DepEd, if the Ombudsman takes cognizance of the case and upon evaluation actually files charges, of course DepEd naman po will commit to cooperate in terms of documentations that needed. That's just in line with what we've been always saying, that we are committed to transparency, and with transparency comes accountability.
Attorney Poa, very, very quickly lang, I think people will appreciate the interventions on the system side, making sure that this doesn't happen again, making sure that things are more efficient, more transparent in the future. But let's go back still to the past. I think one question here is, gaya nga po ng sabi nyo, hindi naman ngayon lang nag-umpisa. But specifically to criminal charges, or at least cases being filed, this was in 2021. Do we really need a Senate committee report to come out? Do we actually need to read that report when this was something that was firmly in the laps of the executive since 2021? Ano po ba ang update doon? Ibig sabihin po ba nito, na since 2021, since pumutok to, wala pang nakakasuhan?
Well, tayo po kasi pumasok tayo noong 2022 na, no? Now, pagpasok natin ng 2022 when this laptop issue came about, number one, what did we do? We requested COA to conduct a fraud audit, which I believe is also one of the recommendations of the Blue Ribbon Committee. Secondly, we also looked into what happened with the specs, no? Because of course there were allegations that the specs that were bidded out were not actually the specs that were awarded. So we looked into that. There was internal investigation. There was a fact-finding proceeding, and then eventually there's an ongoing admin case, no? So siyempre alam naman po natin pagdating sa civil service rules, meron din po tayong mga timelines na sinusunod. We also have to afford due process to the people or the parties involved. But again, there was a request for a COA fraud audit. There was a look at what happened, why there was a certain change in specs all of a sudden. And because of that, admin proceedings ensued.
merong recommendation yung Blue Ribbon to urging the COA to disallow yung 900 million na ibinayad. Anong impact nun sa operations ninyo? Ano pa ba yun? O nabayaran na siya?
No ma'am, because sa tingin ko po, sa aking pananaw, no, base lang kasi again we haven't received the official copy, so honestly hindi ko pa nababasa yung details talaga ng kabuong report. But based on the press con earlier, I believe the recommendation for COA to issue a disallowance was particularly on the persons involved. So personal liability po yan on the part of the persons involved, and it should not affect DepEd.
Pero napakalaki nun Paano yun?
Opo.
900
Well,
million.
yes, I think that question, ma'am, is best directed to COA, no? Because they're more attuned to their procedures. Pero sa amin naman po sa DepEd, kasi yung COA disallowance na yan will be addressed not to DepEd as an institution, but as to the persons involved dun sa transaction.
Yung subsequent procurements nyo, idadaan pa ba sa DBM? Kasi it's easier daw kapag dinadaan sa DBM Less bureaucracy. So anong balak ninyo ngayon?
Well, sa amin naman po, we're really focusing on strengthening the procurement within DepEd.
Yes.
That's particularly why talagang gumawa na tayo ng isang strand dedicated to just procurement. Kasi noon, ano lang siya service po siya, parang opisina sa loob ng isang napakalaking strand. No? So ngayon, the direction is really to improve, and not just improve, really strengthen internal controls as to procurement. And that's why yun po yung ginawa natin dun sa ating Department Order number 1, where there was a revamp of the offices in DepEd. Isa po dun is itong paggawa ng strand for procurement.
Pero kaya nyo bang kasi there's a procurement law, di ba? And
Yes,
yung process has to to comply with those regulations
Yes.
Sabi nga nila, yung ibang agency, yan din na sinasabi, napakahirap daw umorder lang ng lapis saka ballpen. Napakahirap, so much bureaucracy. Kaya nga gusto i-centralize sa DBM na lang para mabilis. Tama ba yun? Is that correct? Or kailangan bang i-amend yung procurement law, you think?
Yes, well sa akin naman po yung pagkakaalam po natin sa PSDBM is that pagdating sa common supplies or common goods, diyan papasok si PSDBM. But for example, for laptops, nagagawa naman po ng DepEd na mag-procure sarili niya ng laptops. It's really about planning, and that's of course what the Vice President Secretary of Education wants, to have adequate planning in advance. Alam naman po natin yung rules, hindi naman bago yung batas. So it's just a matter of planning, and we're confident naman po that we will be able to do that within DepEd.
This 979 million pesos in question, attorney, if I may ask bluntly, realistically, what are the chances it could still be recovered? And I ask because there was a proposal, diba, to use the fund instead and put it in the National Teachers Trust Fund to benefit public school teachers. But realistically, what are we looking at here? Mababalik pa ba yan?
That's true, ma'am. Sa totoo lang, talaga namang malaki yung amount. So it will be actually inappropriate for me to comment if realistically mababalik o hindi, because it will be a personal liability on the part of the parties. But on the part of DepEd, based on the recommendation to try and to actually recover the overpriced amount, I think this is something that DepEd will have to sit down and speak to the Solicitor General about, to the Office of Solicitor General. If cases need to be filed po kasi, it will be the Solicitor General that will be helping us and assisting us as our counsel.
And then the actual laptops in question at the moment, where are they? What are we planning to do with them?
Yes, they're being used, ma'am. The laptops are actually being used. When this happened, we really started talking to those who received these laptops to confirm if they are having problems. Now, with those other laptops that were said to be slow, there were efforts to have a look on why they were slow. When they were updated, we got confirmation that they started working fine. Although we're still there, we're still collating whatever information. If anyone is a recipient of the laptop at mabagal yung laptop, yan po ay talagang inaasikaso natin to see kung it's because heavy yung applications na nasa laptop, because yung specs niya is not sufficient for certain applications, at ina-advise na lang po natin kung ano yung pwedeng gawin. But going forward, syempre po, no, whatever happened here is something that the department will take note of to make sure that when we procure, talaga pong tayo, no, up to spec without passing judgment, because it's hard for us to just simply pass judgment and say talagang under spec and all that, because again, this was from the previous administration. But for us, it's really forward-looking, no? Whatever we think is best and most advantageous to our teachers and learners, that's what we do in terms of procurement.
Attorney
All
po,
of the laptops have been distributed and are being used. Can I just clarify that? Because a few months ago, some of them were still in the warehouses,
Yes,
right?
what happened to those in the warehouses po kasi, we already assigned them to certain regions. No? It was just a matter of delivering them to the regions.
okay. Attorney po, we do have some questions, forward-looking questions as well, but just one last question
Yes, sir.
on this. Those aspects, and again, I acknowledge that without passing judgment, but it is stated as a matter of fact that you had been conducting your own inquiry, among other things, to look into a statement of fact na biglang nagbago ang specs. And what could you share with us just on that question? Paano nangyari ngayon? What do we now know about bakit biglang nagbago ang specs?
Sir Robbie, if you would excuse me, it's very hard for me to share details on the investigation itself because there's an ongoing admin case. But I guess what we could say, we picked up from the Senate, hindi ba? I think that's public naman, yung napag-usapan sa Senate, that there was a debate between the 1.8 with a cash of, I think, 4 is better. Sorry, I'm not an IT person. That it's better even than the 1.9 gigahertz. No? So may ganyang debate, and that was the decision of the BAC. That is now under investigation kasi sa totoo lang, marami rin naman talagang lumabas na mga facts nung Senate investigation. If you would remember, when we were talking about this, we were really focused on the specs. So itong admin proceedings po natin was really focused on who signed off on the change of specs, what happened, bakit ganito yung nangyari, who signed off on the change of price, for example. So yun po yung focus ng admin investigation natin. Ngayon, with what transpired during the Senate proceedings as regards to the discussions between the change in specs, I guess now that the report is out, and there are recommendations for admin charges and also criminal charges to be filed, and that could be also a part of the charges that will be filed and tackled in the appropriate venue.
Sige.
Okay, attorney. Shift gears naman ako.
Sige po.
Tuloy-tuloy na yung ating in-person classes, 99.5% na daw ang public schools, fully in-person. What's the situation? Kumusta siya ngayon?
Well, sa ngayon naman po, talagang patuloy talaga yung ating 5-day in-person classes. And we have to thank, Ma'am Ami, we have to thank the regional directors also. It's not just the central office, but the regional directors and the people on the field who have really made strides to make in-person classes happen again. Sabi nyo nga, 99.54% yung atin. So bakit meron pang hindi? I'm sure everyone is interested to know. Most of it is yung talagang schools po sa atin na naapektuhan ng calamities, na may infrastructure damage, katulad ng itong nakaraang mga low pressure area na shear line na talagang nakapekto sa ating mga schools, and some of them are also still being used as evacuation centers. So kaya po hindi pa rin 100% yung ating 5-day in-person classes. But of course, the ultimate goal is really to bring everyone back to 5-day in-person classes.
Kumusta naman yung situation sa private schools, the ones that continued with blended learning? Kumusta na yung situation?
Yes, sa private schools, I just don't have the numbers right now, pero hindi pa rin siya kasing taas ng public schools instead of in terms of 5-day in-person classes. But again, the private schools have also let's say really have best practices in place pagdating sa blended learning. So that's why we still give them that option. But admittedly, in the public school sector, we really need to, and that's one of the plans no, of the Vice President Secretary of Education is to really optimize then our blended learning. Kasi ito pong infrastructure shortage natin, kakulangan natin sa schools. Habol tayo ng habol every year. No matter how many we build, andyan yung calamity, andyan yung problema. So one of the options maybe is also to look at institutionalizing or optimizing blended learning modality, even in our public schools.
Attorney Poa, in the meantime, President Marcos has been reported and he has said he wants a review of the K-12 curriculum. He's spoken with that. He's aligned with that with DepEd Secretary Vice President Sara Duterte. Kamusta na po itong review to?
Yes, sir. Yung K-10 po natin, regarding the review no, for K-12, yung K-10 natin patapos na po. Finalizing na lang po tayo sa bagong curriculum for K-10. In terms of senior high school, grades 11 and 12, simultaneously, we also started naman that review itong November. There will be more updates, and I think this is a good opportunity for us to also share with the public. No? There will be more updates on that from the Vice President and Secretary of Education herself come January 30. Where she will be delivering what we call the Basic Education Report 2023. No? So she will be presenting the current state of education in the Philippines. So i-disclose po natin kasi we always talk about these challenges, but I think it's very important for the department itself to come out and tell the Filipino public ano ba talaga yung state of basic education in the Philippines. And after that, after the Vice President Secretary of Education presents the state of basic education in the Philippines currently, we will now also roll out yung ating education agenda. So now that we present the problems, we will now present our direction, not just for 2023, but even onwards on how we feel we can best resolve these issues.
These recommendations, these directions will include as well a discussion on, the debate on medium of instruction, English versus mother tongue, for example. Meron na po bang direction? Is there a particular thinking here on the side of the Education Secretary, or for that matter, President Marcos?
Yes, sir. Without preempting, of course, what she's going to say, what the Vice President and Secretary of Education will deliver on January 30, I will say that yes, these things, all these issues, including mother tongue, will also be included in the report, and as well as our direction on the matter. The mother tongue, well, as a medium of instruction, there is a law that says that medium of instruction should be mother tongue for Key Stage 1. But again, we will touch upon this during the Basic Education Report on January 30.
You touched on the shortage in schools, Attorney. I was wondering if you had any updates on the shortage in teachers. Have there been any improvements at all?
Yes, right now, ma'am, we're actively hiring teachers. No, we really endeavor to hire 10,000 teachers for the coming year. But of course, that's the budget for hiring of teachers. Whether or not we're able to hire 10,000 teachers is really the challenge, because there's also the application process, as you know, civil service rules. But aside from that, we also plan to hire. There are already 5,000 non-teaching positions also that were created late last year, and so we are also looking to hire also non-teaching personnel to complement our teachers, because the main complaint, as we've mentioned in the show also previously, of the teachers is that napakarami nilang admin tasks. So to be able to do that, we've started reducing it with the 4 Ps. We took out our teachers from participating in the 4 Ps program. But of course, to be able to do that more effectively in reducing their admin tasks, we need to hire non-teaching personnel. And that's one of the targets also this year.
Well, that's very good to hear.
Thank you, Bob.
Attorney, these are all, of course, these are all the hirings that you mentioned, the openings that you mentioned, these are all for public schools. But we also know during the pandemic, the crisis really hit private schools as well. What programs do we have to attend to that, and trying to bring back the private schools, especially those that also need to fill in that gap in many areas?
Yes, sir. I agree with you. They're really, and I resonate with what you're saying, that the private schools also suffered. Right now, wala pa po akong mabibigay na talagang programa natin, but that is being studied on how we can best help the private schools beyond yung ating existing voucher programs that are done with the private schools. We are now looking into that po talaga. The department is also looking into how we can further support or help the private sector, meaning the private schools.
Attorney, sa health sector, tuloy-tuloy pa rin yung exodus, naghahanap yung mga tao natin, mga nurses natin ng trabaho overseas. Malaki talaga yung diferensya sa sweldo. Are you still seeing the same thing sa teaching profession? Mga teacher ba natin maalis pa rin?
Well, sa ngayon po, we are actually also looking into that, no? Sa ngayon kasi, I don't have the numbers, but sa ngayon kasi, it's for us, is to really now, when we look at teachers, bakit ba sila hirap na hirap sa trabaho nila? Why do they find the need to go overseas? Sa sweldo po kasi, no, as you know, this year with the new tranche of the salary standardization law, tataas na naman yung sweldo ng ating public school teachers. So it's more of, aside from the sweldo, paano pa natin sila matutulungan? So admin task is one of them, and another is also giving them proper support so that they don't find the need to really leave the country. Support meaning reskilling and upskilling. Bakit po? Because ngayon nakikita natin maraming teachers, no, na nagtuturo ng mga subjects na hindi naman nila expertise, for example. So we'd like to give proper support for that. And of course, other benefits that we could give, like GSIS benefits, we're starting conversations with GSIS regarding those benefits. But I think I don't really want to preempt nga po the basic education report of the Vice President. So these things will be discussed in more detail doon po sa report na ibibigay ng ating Vice Presidente.
Okay, Attorney Poa. Sir, maraming salamat po.
Sir, maraming salamat for always giving us the time to also give the side of DepEd on issues. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney.
Michael
Thank you
Poa
po.
po, spokesperson ng Department of Education. And that is it for the Chiefs. We hope what was discussed will keep the conversation going. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
I'm Regina Lay of One News.
I'm Mami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.